I have pressed record. So, welcome everyone. My name is Karen Robinson. I'm the program director of Speak to Power, and I'm so appreciative of you taking your time to join us this morning, or afternoon, or very early morning, wherever you are in the world. I've seen a number of different locations. Um, it is really a great pleasure to be. I think this is our fifth speaker in this series with Nizami Ganjavi International Center, a most brilliant partner, Robshan, who leads the effort there. This partnership has been so rewarding through the speaker series, through the work we're doing in Bosnia and Herzegovina with Speak to Power. It's a partnership that is just really all about international diplomacy, understanding tolerance, understanding, learning, growing together. And today, we are really privileged to have Kolinda Grabar Madam President. I keep tripping on the last name. But before I introduce her, I want to again welcome Zoel, who's a member of our Youth Advisory Board and has really been such a force in facilitating these conversations. So Zoel, good morning. Again, Rovshan from Nizami Ganjavi International Center. Thank you, my friend, for this partnership. And then to our speaker, we are so fortunate and so appreciative of your time this morning. Madam President, you were the fourth and first female president of the Republic of Croatia. In addition to that, you have pushed so many glass ceilings, serving as the first Assistant Secretary General of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, as well as Croatia's first female Minister of Foreign Affairs and Ambassador to the United States of America. In addition to your diplomatic and political career, which is stellar and enough, your academic career and your work in the field of government, international relations, security studies is again kind of glass ceiling breaking, from your studies in at the Vienna Diplomatic Academy, George Washington University, Harvard University, Johns Hopkins University, and the University of Zagreb. Again, really breaking glass ceilings, forging diplomacy, international understanding in the Western Balkans, throughout Europe, and beyond. We are just so honored, and it's such a privilege to have you here today. And before I pass to you to start speaking, I want to hand this over to Robshan for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Karen. Karen already introduced, all the best ways that it's possible to introduce Madam President. But Madam President, thank you so much for joining us. You've been an example during this, especially Olympic World Cup Championship, how female leadership should be done. And you are an example, and we've been so proud, having you to be joining us. I've been sending Karen messages, that Madam President Kolinda already joined us, and I've been sending all the pictures from the World Cup Championship and all this great works that you have done. But our world needs female leaders, women leaders, and it's not possible without that. But today, I will not talk too much. Today there is a special day, tomorrow. And tomorrow is President Kolinda's birthday. It's a small birthday cake for her.
Thank you.
And you can make a birthday wish, and I can just make for you.
Should I blow the candles?
Yes, please.
You blow them for me. Okay, let's go. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. It was so wonderful.
And once more, happy birthday. And thank you so much for being with us. And I'm sure that we will be enjoying lots from your wisdom and from your experience.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karen and Roshan, for such a wonderful introduction. Thank you, Zoel, also for co-organizing this. I'm very happy and very privileged to be here today. And what I want to talk about is the value of leadership above partisanship, which is something that I deeply believe in. And even though Roshan mentioned the World Cup photo, something that I'm probably most remember of around the world, I do like to focus on some of the more substantial initiatives and ideas that I try to promote. But nevertheless, the World Cup was also looked at different points of the value of leadership, especially from that human side that I like to attach to it. So just to give a brief introduction, today we live in times of great opportunities and serious challenges. We're more interconnected than ever. However, our world remains divided in many ways, and this is increasingly characterized by a lack of solidarity and rifts that we see emerging within, across, and among societies, nations, and regions. We live in a complex geopolitical and global security environment with increased mutual dependencies. And there is a whole range of hybrid and what some people have started to call hyper threats to national and international security, violent extremism, terrorism, organized crime, risks related to the cyber environment and the malicious use of new and disruptive technologies, the related ethical issues, even new types of warfare, to mention just some of them. And of course, climate change, as I have underlined so many times, is becoming a weapon of mass destruction. Large-scale migrations and unemployment, lack of opportunities, they're all interconnected, just as failed states and fragile governments are related to conflict. And all these trends have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemics. And in all this, looking at the global situation and our interconnectedness, the respect for and the protection of human rights is a prerequisite for sustainable peace and development. There is an evident need for ending the prevailing silo approach if we are to achieve synergies when implementing mutually interdependent goals. Security, prosperity, and human rights go hand in hand and cannot be separated. And when I say a silo approach, by silo approach, I don't mean just separating these issues and looking at them in isolation. But by silo approach, I also mean separating the multiple actors in international relations on the global scene by what I would say outdated or even archaic division of labor. Today, we have to integrate, we have to work across these lines of division, across the silos. We must work together and we must be leaders in our respective fields, whether it be governments, international organizations, academia, and we must be working with every willing partner who promotes these goals. And that in every respect includes all of you who are watching today, all of us as responsive and responsible citizens. The world has been yearning for inspirational and effective leadership. And what is it that people are looking for today? And what is it that they expect of a leader? I talk to a lot of people out in the field, and I really love spending time with people, as I believe that is the best way to stay firmly grounded, to get the real idea of what life is like, in contrast to being isolated, either by media reports or your own advisors, who, as you know, often tend to tell you the good news, but nobody wants to carry the bad news. So what do people expect? They expect deeds, not words any longer. But what they expect is the simplest of gestures that bring us together, that show our compassion and respect for each other. They expect integrity and inspiration. And I think this is one of the reasons, Roshan, why those photos from the World Cup have resonated around the world. In a way, Croatia at the time became a metaphor for every single nation, regardless of their size, of the size of their territory or of their population, but having achieved a great goal and being an inspiration to everyone. Unfortunately, in recent years and decades, politicians have distanced themselves from the public. They have become perceived as elites or establishments, which has spurred more resistance and distrust towards these perceived establishments, especially among the young, which itself reflects in distrust towards institutions. And of course, we know that trust is the basis of human relationships, that trust is the basis of a democracy, as democracy is based on voluntary participation and compliance by citizens. And distrust is corrosive to human relationship. And this today is reflected in the elections, where a lot of people come out and vote not for, but against someone or something. They often make unknown and risky choices just because they're not these third options or new choices or fourth or fifth options are not perceived as part of the establishment. So it's sort of a reaction towards the establishment rather than making a clear choice of what the future should look like. People are discouraged from elections as well as from political engagement and advocacy and activism. And this is what I want to discuss with you today, how to spur that advocacy and activism, how to begin by restoring public confidence in governments and international organizations and leaders, politicians, and our communities as responsible citizens. In order to do that, of course, we must embrace our common values, universal values, with courage and true conviction, beginning with tolerance and inclusion. Tolerance towards each other and including everyone. And true inclusiveness means more than just being open to cooperation and raising awareness from time to time and occasionally speaking about these topics. It should be a continuous search for consensus, both nationally and internationally, as we see increasingly the rifts on the international scene. And it should also be active involvement of all stakeholders in building new strategic alliances that go across the different levels of actors in international relations today. So let me share with you some of my own experiences in promoting the goals that are dear to my heart. First, I'd like to underline that everything begins at home, in one's family, in one's close environment that shaped us. Our upbringing, our own life experiences, successes and failures, keeping an open mind and dealing with prejudice. And I'd like to underline that it's, when we talk about prejudice, it's not just the prejudice of others, but our own prejudice. All of these aspects shape our perspectives and leadership styles. They define what is important to us. Therefore, it is so important to start instilling the values precisely at home, in local communities, and from a very early age on. We can and must use our personal and positional power that comes from the office that we occupy, or the function that we hold, or the job that we do. We must use that power for advocacy that goes beyond the constraints of our office. And I will talk a little bit more about that when I talk about my experience as president. So we obviously change and develop as circumstances change, and experience to shape us, and our priorities shift, and we need to be able to adjust them to the changing landscape around us. And we need to recognize them in order to be able to set our own vision and our own strategy, in order to be able to understand others and to be able to empathize with others and work with others effectively, and manage conflict situations, build relationships and networks. When I look at my own formative experiences, then when I think of what defines me most, of course, going back to my childhood, and I recount everything today, both accomplishments and disappointments. However, there are several clusters that were so important to me. I was born in a very humble rural environment, and my parents and education, I would say, were the two most important factors in providing the opportunities for me for what I have achieved in life so far. My parents have had the greatest impact on my life. They were barely able to finish elementary school. However, they were so wise in the ways of the world, and they taught me so many values, such as hard work, achieving excellence, ambition, but also modesty, honesty, integrity, respect, and to treat others in the same way that I would expect others to treat me. Another important factor was playing games with the boys and realizing that for most part, I was basically better at almost everything. So that instilled in me a strong self-confidence and equality. However, unfortunately, throughout my career, I will later learn that in life, gender does come to play so much still today, that women still have to work harder to prove that they're of equal value or as competent as men, and that we're still looked at through a different pair of spectacles than men. It seems that that vision is distorted, and that the media and the public still focus on our physical features, whereas our professional capacities and other initiatives unfortunately remain blurred. So dealing with prejudice was an important aspect in my life. From the background where I came from, my own family, the local circumstances, to, again, gender, to women, to prejudice against women, to misogyny. And as I said, it's very important to deal with that and to fight that. However, one must also realize that we can be those who are harboring prejudice. And sometimes that is the most difficult thing to do, to recognize that you may be prejudiced yourself, and then to get rid of it and to deal with it. So throughout my career, and in particular when I was president, I think that somehow the Croatian society even regressed with that respect. When I compare my experience as the first female minister of foreign affairs and European integration to my experience as president, I think that I faced a lot more prejudice, gender bias, and misogyny than I did when I was foreign minister. Maybe because the office was higher, maybe because the stakes were higher. I don't know why, but there were all sorts of things that the media or the public or certain elements through trolling, misinformation, false information, taking out of context, etc., would do. For instance, they would post bikini photos of women all over the internet, and those photos are clearly not mine. There were papers who created a so-called Kolinda's cheat sheet, as if every morning I had to write reminders for myself that were actually so stupid that I even offered to write those myself to them to make them more intelligent. To the so-called Plan Barbie before I was elected, which was designed to frame the discussion within the context of gender, and trying to re-feminize a presidential candidate who was coming from NATO, who on the other hand is perceived as a male domain, so somebody who has made it in the male domain. People who are the media would focus a lot on clothes and hairstyles, and sometimes to the point that they would become breaking news from very important state visits or other initiatives that I would launch and that I would support. And the the ultimate question of the balance between your career and your family. It's a very valid issue that needs to be posed because it's still a lot more difficult for women. But people don't even think of asking the same question of men. How do you balance between your career and your family? Because it's presumed that it's the right of men to pursue their career and have somebody else to take care of their family. I don't think that's fair to men either. So it takes patience and perseverance to endure. And we need support from others, from family, from peers, from friends, but also from government, international institutions, advocacy groups, etc. And my own political engagement came as a result of adversity and being unhappy with the political circumstances in Croatia. So if you're not happy with the situation that you live in, do something about it. Start changing it. One step at a time. Do become politically engaged or do become engaged through advocacy. It's absolutely futile just to criticize the situation in society in a private environment or as an anonymous person underneath a certain article. If we live in democracies, we should be able to sign our own name underneath any comment that we make, and we should be responsible for any comments that we make. So I mentioned already that when I became president, being with the people was very important to me, being the voice of the people. Now, this is often taken in the wrong way. It's portrayed as astratization of politics or populism by the media, but there is a huge difference. If you're doing this as populism in approach, so being with the people because you promised to them that you would be among them, that you would listen to them. And believe me, sometimes just a smile is enough. They don't even expect of you to do something important to them if they realize that your powers are limited. But populism in substance, of course, is very dangerous, and that means manipulating with the base emotions of the population to ensure personal political gain. And I think that we need to educate the public, especially young people, in what actual populism is. Because if somebody is just criticizing whatever situation in the country or anywhere, but they're not providing any solutions to the problem, they're just manipulating your emotions, and they're actually acting towards fulfilling what I said in the beginning, to vote against and not for something. There are many other issues that define inequalities that are at the root of contemporary problems. And as leaders and all of us, we should not just be managing crisis and solving problems, but we should be spreading hope and optimism. We must demonstrate our humanity, solidarity, and compassion. And the issues that are so dear to me and that I try to promote both on the national and international scene, embodied in the multilateralism, which I think is of ultimate value. And it, again, begins at home with us, with local communities. It's not just the place of the United Nations, of New York, Geneva, or any other place in the world. It must be omnipresent. So these values are embodied in the SDGs, of which I talked so much at the United Nations. When in 2015, the United Nations developed the so-called Sustainable Development Goals, a set of 17 goals as a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. The target date being the year 2030, which is 9 years from now. And now with the pandemic, unfortunately, I think we have been very much slowed down in the implementation of these goals. But I would like to single out 3 issues that are of cross-cutting importance for all other. First is education. Again, the basis of development of any individual, of any community, of any nation, or our globalized world. It's the single most important development tool and the most powerful weapon against inequality, prejudice, hate, and extremism of any kind. And the social aspects of education are equally important as academic education. I must say, though, that what really worries me is the correlation of ethnic data at schools vis-a-vis the scholastic achievement test results, and the fact that children of lower socioeconomic backgrounds start to fall behind the economically more advantaged children as a third grade, even in high income societies. So in low and medium income societies, and in particular in areas of conflict and refugee camps, we have entire generations lost. And we lose incredible human resources, human capital. So universal access to education, unfortunately, can be limited by arbitrarily imposed cultural or religious restrictions. It can become a powerful weapon of manipulation and promotion of radical ideologies or ideas if misused in the hands of extremist interests and terrorist groups. Just as with any other issues, it can become a divisive issue across society. So it requires social consensus and responsible action from all of us working across divided societies and listening to all the arguments with our responsibility to build bridges and bring communities together among the common goal. And in this and any other issue that we promote, public interest and the need for social consensus on any issue of common interest overrides any particular interest or the polling numbers of any of us. And for this reason, I have promoted education in so many ways, including ambition in young generations, by mentoring, by promoting the educational reform in Croatia, by starting a program, Croatia Reads, and reading to children at Croatian schools to encourage the habit of long-term reading. Now, gender, again, as I said, I never felt in any way inferior to men. And as a matter of fact, I never even thought of myself in terms of gender when it comes to my responsibilities, the work that I do, etc. However, I always felt that moral obligation, that it's sort of a trailblazer myself, and having navigated so many glass labyrinths that you mentioned in the beginning and pushed up so many glass ceilings, I have a duty to use my personal and positional power to pursue and promote gender equality. And this is why it has been a major policy component in whatever I did throughout all the offices that I held, including at NATO, where on many visits to Afghanistan, I always made sure to include local women, from those in position of power to those working individually. And then through virtual Silk Road Afghanistan program, introducing broadband internet, which provided opportunities for everyone, and in particular women, as we created special areas for women to pursue education and to work online. And economic empowerment did wonders and had a true snowball effect. I just wish that we could really preserve it. Now, climate change is also one of those overriding issues. As I mentioned, a powerful weapon of mass destruction. And in all of this, what permeates everything is equitable, or rather inequitable, access to resources and opportunities, which is so much visible with the COVID-19 crisis, with the lack of vaccine, medication, and treatment options for many people around the world, in particular in low and medium income countries. So looking at the world today, when we think of human rights, most people think of civic and political rights. However, social rights, including what I mentioned, access to healthcare, are human rights too, and many other social rights as economic empowerment, and again, equitable access to resources and opportunities. And looking at the way that we have been developing since the pandemic hit, but also years before that, we truly must decide whether we opt for open or closed societies. As societies developed or undeveloped, we're currently facing not only one generation that is affected by this crisis, but several generations of youth that are unemployed, disappointed, and discouraged, while others are trying to escape from conflict, violence, intolerance, and they're extremely skeptical about their future and become easy prey for all kinds of manipulation and radicalization. And added to that, social media and modern communications technology are becoming a double-edged sword. On the one hand, they provide for democratization of the media space, for unparalleled opportunities for learning, for the economy, making the world interconnected, that only just a few months ago, a few dared to dream of. This pandemic has certainly accelerated some of these trends. However, at the same time, of course, the social media and this connectivity, in particular disruptive technologies, carry that dark potential to spread hatred and intolerance and build invisible walls around those who look or think differently within our own communities or between different entities on the global scene. So we must pay special attention to the possibility and find the use for new technologies to improve not only our daily lives, but also the way that we think, interact together, and the way that we promote universal human rights. So education, knowledge, and tolerance are more than just the tools of choice when dealing with political and social discrimination, exclusion, and the prevention of violent extremism and terrorism. They are the way forward, and they are the key to success and are fundamental drivers of sustainable development. Now, looking at, what I mentioned in the beginning, what kind of leaders people are looking for to close these opening remarks and to continue with the discussion in the way that you would like to take it. A few words on leadership from this experience that I've had carrying out these difficult mandates and having sometimes an easier, sometimes not an easy time in office. But definitely leaders are not born. They're made through time, through these personal experiences that I mentioned, personal growth. We're all shaped by personal, environmental, and professional experiences. And we often think of leaders as having these positive characteristics, very positive characteristics, such as leadership, intelligence, self-confidence, vision, eloquence, courage, charisma, etc. And yes, those are important characteristics. However, I think we can all testify to that. Leaders are only human too. They're not always super confident. They have their weaknesses and moments of crisis and vulnerability. They have doubts. They change their minds more often than you would think. And they too experience uncertainty or this unproductive constancy, the so-called most useless places of all, the waiting spaces, the complacency, the status quo. So leadership isn't about success only. Before you get there, you have to learn to deal with failures. And in your life, you will face adversity, uncertainty, hardship, disruption, transformation, then recovery, new beginnings, and other significant challenges. It's always up and down, up and down. So it's up to you how fast you actually bounce back. Failure and lack of success, they hit you hard. They're not easy to take, but through the ups and the downs, or through the waiting rooms, all these experiences that make up your life, you have to develop resilience. That's when people say what doesn't kill you makes you strong eventually. That eventually does come at a certain point. So after a period of introspection, it is time to start a new chapter. Because after all, if you keep reading the same pages all over again, you will never finish the book. So learn from your own mistakes as you do from those of others, but don't lose your self-confidence, self-esteem, and the desire to continue to be engaged. Keep in perspective what is important for you. But through all of that, please remember to hold on to your values, and please remember to hold on to the universal human rights. They're not cultural, they're not religious, they're not geographically classified in any way, such as Western or any other, but they are universal values and human rights. So please remember to hold on to them, even when you have to change your goals. The most important value for me has always been respect. Respect yourself and show others that you respect them. And along with trust that I mentioned as the basis for human relationship and for democracy, after all, respect is the most important currency in interpersonal relations. It really pays off to invest that respect, to include and to show solidarity. And we're going to need a lot more of it in the months and years that are ahead of us. So thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate your remarks. I think we're going to move a little more into questions from the audience now. So our first question comes, well, of course, from the audience. First, of course, thank you for your remarks, but how did you challenge gender prejudices in your field of work specifically? And what would you recommend to other women who are facing similar issues?
As a woman, especially as a woman who holds a public office, it's always a very delicate issue to deal with and a delicate path to a threat. Because it can be perceived as a self-serving interest or purpose. People can accuse you of, she's promoting women's rights only because she wants special treatment for herself. She's looking for excuses why she hasn't done this or that, why she hasn't succeeded. And again, when I would encounter prejudices like that, unfortunately, there wasn't much support from the NGO sector. They would always say, she's powerful enough, she can defend herself. And perhaps that's a valid point. But as I mentioned, through time you get stronger, and I got stronger. So today it doesn't really upset me personally. But what I am concerned about is the precedents that we're setting in society. Because as president, you are always perceived as somebody who is protected in many ways, not just the physical protection by the Secret Service, but also people think that you're protected from many other issues that they have to deal in everyday life, such as prejudice, gender issues, or inequality, etc. So if they perceive you or they perceive the way that you're being offended or treated as a woman, and focusing again on your appearance and calling you all sorts of names that pertain to hate speech, and this is what's a problem in most of our societies today. If you told that to someone of different ethnic origin, it would be immediately declared as hate speech. But unfortunately, still not when you say something like that to a woman. So I was always concerned about the precedents that we were setting. And I tried to bring that to everyone's attention. And I believe what we need to do and what we need to work more on, and that is the education of the media. They have the right to all media freedoms. They have the right to the facts, but they also have media responsibility in not just giving the right facts and truthful information, but in also setting trends in society. And I believe that all of you, young people, by young, I mean those young at mind, not, I don't look at age as much as the state of mind that defines our age, that all of you should be involved, especially on social media, and that we should be pushing for some sort of regulation that would regulate, it will allow for media freedoms, but that would regulate hate speech. And those precedents that set dangerous examples that others follow in their relationship with their peers, whether it be friends at school or family members or people who belong to a wider circle in society.
Thank you. To follow up on that same idea of, the protection of women, another question from the audience is more about the role of state in these gender issues. The UNCEDAW Convention says that states should take all appropriate measures to struggle with the prejudices and customary harmful practices and stereotypes based on the superiority of men. From your experience, to what extent should the government to what extent should the government intervene to tackle this problem vis-a-vis existing traditional social norms in society?
Well, certainly all of these norms need to be put into legislation. And in most of our societies, they are. In Croatia, I dare say that we probably have some of the top legislation that regulates the rights of individuals, from religious and ethnical rights to even gender rights. However, unfortunately, the practice is much different. We need a change of mindsets. We need implementation of those measures. If you look at examples of how men or perpetrators of domestic violence in general are treated, they usually get away with very light sentences. You have so many women killed in families and in the social system because the state does not react on time. We still look at that from a distance, like it's none of my business. It's not my job. So I think that aside from really putting legislation into practice, I think the state should work with the civil sector in order to devise and promote different campaigns. I remember years ago when Croatia worked with, I can't remember whether it was UN Women or who it was who were working together with Croatia on the prevention of domestic violence. And there was this really good commercial that I think struck everyone. And that was this kid telling the camera that on Saturday, some neighbor students had a loud party and his grandma called the police because they were being loud. And then on Sunday, his neighbor so-and-so was beating up his wife, but the grandma did not call the police. So he asked the grandma, why don't you call the police now? Because he is also disturbing peace and he's being very loud and he's beating his wife. And the grandma said, it's none of our business, it's their business. So the problem of it's none of our business, it's their business, sweeping things under the rug, this is the practice that we have to stop with. And this is where we need to point to the level that we become annoying ourselves. And now that I don't hold a public office any longer, I think I can sort of take that privilege of being annoying in pushing for gender rights and human rights in general.
Fair enough. This next question comes from a member of the audience who shared exhilaration in the World Cup final in 2018 and finds it to be a very incredible moment for Croatians and people of Croatian descent. But their question is one that regards more population growth and economic opportunity. Now, we have here a brief explanation. Now, one of the biggest problems facing Croatia and countries like it is its decline in population. Youth unemployment is currently over 20%, and the same is true for other nations such as Spain, Greece, Italy, and Portugal. The parents of the person who asked this question left then Yugoslavia, which was today's Croatia, for the US in the early 1970s because of some of the limits of the socialist system. Today, friends of the person who asked the question who are in Croatia are leaving as well for economic reasons, and it is disheartening, as I'm sure many do not want to leave. Now, the real question here is, while other countries such as Portugal and Estonia have successfully invested deeply into building technological economy, the question really is, why hasn't Croatia pursued this competitive advantage, and why there hasn't been a deeper investment in these sectors of the economy, such as science and technology, to make Croatia a digital-first economy and ensure job growth in what is the two fastest growing global industries. So in your opinion, what do you believe will address these two problems, youth population decline and lack of economic opportunity, that Croatia and other countries in similar situations face?
Well, this is an excellent question, actually. And the person who posed it really hit the gist of it all, including solution to the problem that was posed in the first part of the question. Yes, we do have not just Croatia, but a number of countries. And I said that in my opening remarks, we're facing not just a generation, but generations of unemployed and dissatisfied young people. In Croatia in particular, and that whole territory, we have had problems with demographic trends and emigration for different reasons, for political, economic reasons throughout centuries and throughout decades. And after Croatia acceded to the European Union in the year 2013, it was understandable that a number of people would leave to pursue opportunities in education and working abroad, but my hope is for them to return enriched with the experience, knowledge, and ethics that they have gained in these societies that have been democratic societies and market economies for a lot longer than Croatia has been. But the trends are really negative, especially unemployment among the young. And of course, if the young cannot get first employment, there is no chance of them getting better employment afterwards. So they have to leave and seek opportunities elsewhere. And quite rightfully so, the person who posed the question mentions digitalization and digital technologies. I think that is one of the solutions to many of the demographic aspects that we are facing. I must tell you though, looking at the introductory remarks when I said that unfortunately my address would sometimes draw more attention than the substance of what I was talking about, I really put a lot of effort into writing a demographic strategy. I'm not an expert, but I put together a lot of work. I read a lot of the former strategies of Croatia, the strategies of other countries. Estonia was mentioned, Ireland is one of the countries. It turns out that, yes, these demographic issues are not just issues of how many people are born or die each year. They're a lot more complex. They delve into the economic domain, but also the social domain, how happy you are with the circumstances, the level of optimism, which unfortunately currently in Croatia is relatively low. And I think that the atmosphere of lack of optimism and enthusiasm, it's what's driving people away. So there's this whole strategy. I hope somebody will take it up and continue working on that, because I do believe that there are a lot of important aspects, a lot of important proposals that can be developed further. One of them is the development of IT technologies. Throughout the 5 years of my term in office as president, I was saying that relying too much on tourism is very dangerous. Even before the pandemic, I was saying that tourism is one of those industries that should be just sort of cherry or cream on top of the cake, the whipped cream, but cannot be the base of the structure of our economy, because it's too volatile. It depends on weather, it depends on security issues, it depends a lot on whatever search engine declares whoever is the best tourist destination, especially in the context of the competing countries with respect to Croatia. So the base of our economy needs to be a lot more solid. Now we can return to some industries, some traditional industries and production, but where we really have talent and where a lot of young people are leading and being very successful in startups all over the world. I met with a number of them in London, for instance, is precisely digital technologies. And I see that with my own son, who is completely into programming, coding, computer science. What he wants to stay, he's staying to study in Croatia. He wants to remain in Croatia. But unfortunately, a lot of young people don't. Again, I want to encourage them to go and work abroad and to make some money and to gain that experience. But, please do come back, because Croatia, as you can see from the poster that's behind me, is absolutely beautiful. Great quality of living. We could really have a great, great country. We just need to put in a lot more effort into working on long-term strategies and looking at these global modern term developments, skill shifts, the school system that needs to be adapted to the modern market of the 21st century, not to educate people for these professions that will disappear or within a few years, or maybe have already disappeared during the pandemic, but to educate people for jobs of the future in order to create value for the individual and value for the nation or the country.
Certainly. And there you talked a little bit about that long-term economic investment. And if you look at, the lowest level of an economic block, you could argue that that is the family. So I would ask that, what can you say about how communities that are strongly affected and broken because of poverty, epidemic, prison violence, and these other things, how could you say that these, families can have a place in this newer system?
Of course, in addition to an individual as being the basis of any democratic system, families are very important. And I said a lot comes from the family, or whatever community is your family at a certain time. It doesn't have to be your biological parents, but whoever is the group who are educating you and bringing you up. So it's very important to support families. I think that, again, in the months and years to come, we will only see what the impact of the pandemic has been on families. We have started to talk about mental health issues for everyone. Unfortunately, I do believe, although this isn't something that is being discussed very much, but I think that the level of domestic violence has increased greatly among family members. You can just, and I was thinking about that last year when we were in complete lockdown. I was going crazy for not being able to get out of my apartment for 2 weeks because I was in self-isolation. And I was thinking, just imagine what families where there was domestic violence even before must be going through with the person who violates their rights, the person who's aggressive towards them is, again, feeling this pressure of confinement. It felt almost like being under house arrest. And secondly, substance abuse problems, which probably increased within families, especially with aggressive family members. The standards we probably saved up some money because we weren't going outside for a year, so we were not spending money on clothes, shoes, and things like that. Maybe we'll use that for some travel this summer to get out of the confines of our own apartments and the very close communities that we have belonged to. But this pandemic, I'm afraid, has increased these socioeconomic differences that I talked about that affect education as well, the level of education. It has to do, of course, with the availability of internet, with the speed of internet, which is very different, not only among low and medium and high income countries, but also within countries, within societies. There are regional differences. When we talked about the demographic strategy, I think that digitalization can help those areas, such as islands and isolated rural areas, for people to stay there for quality life. But they need to have access to education, to telemedicine, etc. Now, imagine a family who only has access to one smart device, or a couple, that they have to use and divide between the mother and the father, or the parents, or just one working parent, whoever is working, and the children who attend school. So they need to share that. And I'm afraid that women, again, that gender comes to play, that as mothers, as parents, you're always, leave the device or leave the time first, of course, to the one who is supporting the family financially. And a lot of women had to quit jobs in order to take care of family members. They're the primary caretakers. And to their children who attend school. Then, of course, it's the quality of the devices, the quality of the programming. So in some countries, we were less prepared than in others. It did speed up the process of digitalization of education, of work, of telemedicine, etc. But again, I'm afraid that it will continue to increase the social and economic differences within and among societies. And this is where we need to focus in dealing not just with the medical issues with vaccination and the economic fallout of the pandemic, but also the social, mental healthcare issues and long-term issues on employment, inclusion and engagement of families and societies.
Thank you. This is going to be our last question here. And I think it really relates to what you were talking about, family and education as well. And that's also something that has been very affected by the pandemic, as you mentioned. Specifically, this is a more specific issue, but a big problem with public education as a vehicle for specifically human rights education in the United States is that our institution by its nature is politically driven. We find ourselves, especially those of us in the classroom, trapped behind bureaucracy and many public interests. The education system is generally under local control, creating wide-ranging differences in priorities and curriculums. We also have federal mandates that focus strictly on academic performance and ignore social emotional needs, such as human rights. Do you have any thoughts on depoliticizing human rights for public education institutions with popular elected governments?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a very important issue. I have experience in having gone through different public schools myself, but also with my children who attended school here in the US. And in Croatia. And again, I was struck by how socioeconomic differences affect the scholastic achievement test results and determine the future, unfortunately trapping some individuals in their own communities and not providing for equal opportunities as we would like to see in any society. And the issue of civic education is incredibly, incredibly important. This is something that plagues the Croatian curricular or school system as well. We just have not been able to come up with a general class that is completely free of any kind of ideology that teaches you your rights and responsibilities as a citizen. The closest to that, what I've seen from my own experience was when I was in high school in 1985-86 as a foreign exchange student in New Mexico, where we had a law and government class and a wonderful teacher. I think it really depends a lot on teachers and with respect to school, on local communities, on principals, on teachers, on how much parents are engaged and how much additional money they put into educational needs. So that law and government class was something that left a mark on me for the rest of the life. And my dear teacher, Mrs. Williams, who taught us, well, I had to take it because of my diploma here, but I was really interested in it. It taught us about the Constitution, constitutional rights. We had a lot of mock events, such as mock trials. We went to the New Mexico Supreme Court for a visit. We went even to the state penitentiary for a visit to see what the rights of prisoners are. So it was sort of giving you an insight into what the possibilities there are for you to act as a citizen. And she precisely encouraged a student responsibility. And it was then when I had, when having come from a system like the former Yugoslavia, I encountered for the first time the authority of the teacher being questioned by a student who said, Mrs. Williams, I don't think that you're right in something, whatever you said. I'm going to check this and I'm going to come back to you tomorrow. And Mrs. Williams encouraged the student, yes, by all means, it is your right to question the authority by looking at the right facts and figures. At the time, there were no smart devices. So the student, who happened to be a female student, went to the library and she came back the next day, and it turned out that the student was right. So it was a huge cultural shock, but also a positive experience of what I believe that civic education should be about, precisely, telling you this is what exists, this is what your constitution is about. These are your rights, but these are also your responsibilities, and this is how you can pursue them.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Madam President. And that'll be the end for our little Q&A sector.
Thank you.
So I'm looking at the clock and feeling like we could continue this conversation for at least another hour. It's so fascinating. And I'd like to say, go Mrs. Williams. That pedagogical approach of questioning is so critical and really not emphasized enough in our schools. So thank you for that. And thank you, Ms. Williams, wherever you are. And thank you, Madam President. This was brilliant. And I really feel like there's so much I'm walking away with to reflect on as I go forward in my day. But there are 3 points that I really wanted to raise that are sticking in my head. The first is when you mentioned work begins at home. That makes me think of Eleanor Roosevelt and the 10th anniversary of the UDHR, where after all, do human rights begin? Close to home, so close. So I appreciated that thought. The second, your comment about your parents and recognizing how much they taught you with the level of education they had. Education, both formal, non-formal, and informal, make us who we are, and all of it is so valuable. And you really captured that so beautifully. So thank you. And then gender justice. And I'm so thrilled that you're annoyed and out of office now, so you can really dive into this, because I have no doubt that with your leadership in this field, in this way, we will achieve more and more gender justice, which is so needed. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to thank again Rovshan and Nizami Ganjavi International Center. You have brought us so many brilliant speakers so far this year. I can't thank you enough. And particularly so many women leaders who are what we need in our world. So thank you. Thank you, Zoel, for facilitating. This has been just such a brilliant session, and I'm leaving with so much in my head. So thank you all.
In our experience, like, in our tradition, we have one thing that the mother has a key play to play in the family. They are teaching us what we have to do. Like, we have to follow up them. We are not, we have to obey to them in terms of like in a good way. And they are teaching us like, kindness and, how to be hospitality and everything. And I think that that's the best way, like, what we could get in our traditions. And we are definitely more than lucky to have more and more women leaders like Madam President Kolinda Grabar Kitarovic to join NJIC, along with Madam President Varevika Freberga, who was the first speaker of our event. And I think that we are going to continue to more and more events. And we hope that Madam President Kolinda will join us RFK annual gala dinner. Hopefully, like, with this, without COVID situation in New York.
So yeah, I hope so, certainly.
Yeah. So thanks, everyone. Please, if you're new to RFK Human Rights and Speak to Power, please check out our website and learn more about the programs we have going on. If you want to learn more about human rights education and learning, please reach out to us. We believe that human rights is a foundation for all of us, for our economic, civil, cultural, political rights. So please check us out and join us this afternoon at 3 o'clock Eastern time, when we will have the final SDG Sustainable Development Goals session with youth climate activist Maria Claire Goff. If you need to learn more about that, just reach out to us at Speak to Power. And again, thank you, everyone. Have a brilliant day. Stay safe. Take care of yourself and take care of each other.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.